I said I didn't want the sweets. I said no. The little girl cried, tears streaking her cheeks as the man tightened his grip. Quiet, he hissed, yanking her toward the alley. But before he could take another step, the royal guard moved, breaking centuries of protocol in an instant. What happened next stunned the entire crowd outside Buckingham Palace. Before we reveal the full story, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below telling us where in the world you're watching from. Now, without further ado, let's get into it. Buckingham Palace had never looked more picture-perfect. Well, okay, maybe it had. But beneath that soft summer blue sky with the black and gold gates practically gleaming in the late morning sun, it felt like something. Out of a postcard, tourists lined the ceremonial barriers, shoulder-tosh shoulder phones raised high, trying to capture every single inch of the grandeur. The flags fluttered above the palace while that unmistakable sound, boots striking stone, in perfect rhythm echoed in the distance. The changing of the guard had begun. Among the hundreds gathered that day stood the Whittaker family from Charlotte, North Carolina. First time in London, actually first time abroad, period. They'd taken one of those red double-decker buses to the palace, marveling at, well, everything from the architecture to the way the guards moved with such precision. Their daughter, 8-year-old Maddie, had on this bright red hoodie and these sparkly trainers that lit up every time she took a step. Wide-eyed and curious, she clutched her little Union Jack flag like it was treasure or something. She was small for her age, all thin arms and messy blonde ponytail, the kind of kid who seemed to soak in everything around her until something else caught her attention. "Stay close, baby," her mother said, fiddling with her camera strap. "Don't go wandering." "I just want to see better," Maddie replied, already slipping away a few paces through the crowd to find a clearer view. Then the marching band's drum line surged suddenly, drawing this new wave of tourists toward the procession. Cameras clicked, elbows bumped, and in that moment, we're talking barely more than a few seconds, Maddie's small hand slipped from her father's grasp. She turned, expecting to see them, right behind her, but the faces around her just blurred together, strangers speaking in accents she didn't recognize. The crowd had shifted like a tide or something. She spun once, twice, searching for her mother's red scarf or her father's baseball. "Cap, Mom?" She called, trying to stay calm. No answer. Her voice grew smaller. "Daddy?" Still nothing. She was surrounded on all sides, yet completely alone. Her heart began to race. She stood frozen for a moment, the ceremony continuing around her like she wasn't even there. A few people bumped past her, totally oblivious. One woman nearly tripped over her and gave this quick, annoyed, "Watch it!" Before moving on, Maddie wiped her nose on her sleeve and tried to retrace her steps, but she couldn't remember where the gate had been. Every black iron post looked exactly the same. She wandered further into the crowd, squeezing between legs and bags and swinging cameras, hoping that each new face might be one she recognized. Her eyes filled with tears. But she blinked them back. Her parents had told her not to cry in public, not to talk to strangers. But what was she supposed to do now? She hugged herself tightly, eyes darting left and right. The noise of the band, the chatter of tourists, and the click of thousands of camera shutters all blurred together in this dizzying wave of sound. Then as she stepped to the edge of a clearing near the palace forecourt, a new sound rose above the rest. "Right, left," barked the rhythmic command. The royal guards, tall, unmoving, like they were carved out of stone or something, lined the palace route in perfect symmetry. Maddie's eyes landed on one of them. He didn't move a muscle, but he was the only person not bustling, not busy, not walking away from her. Somehow that stillness calmed her. She was about to walk toward the barrier when she felt a presence behind her. A man's voice, low, kind, and way too close. "There you are," he said gently. "You must be lost, sweetheart. Why don't I help you find your mommy and daddy?" Maddie froze. The man crouched slightly to meet her eye level, wearing this navy blazer and dark jeans. He looked clean, respectable even. His smile was tight, but practiced. The kind adults wear when they're trying too hard to seem safe. He didn't look like a monster. That was the worst part. Maddie took a step back. "It's okay," he said softly, hands raised like he was calming some scared animal. "You're not in trouble. I saw you walking by yourself and figured you got separated. These crowds can be a nightmare. Tell you what, let's go find a palace guard or a policeman. Together." "Yeah." She didn't answer. "Or maybe you'd like a chocolate bar. I've got one in my bag, just something to make you feel better while we wait for your parents to turn up." Maddie shook her head, remembering what her mother had said. Don't take anything from strangers, especially candy. Her parents had even taught her the term bad touch. What to do if someone made her uncomfortable. But this wasn't like the videos at school. It was messier. It didn't feel dangerous at first, just off. "I'm not allowed to go with strangers," she muttered. His smile remained, but something cold flickered in his eyes. "Oh, I'm not a stranger. I'm a helper. See, my daughter's just about your age. Same wild hair, too." He laughed as if they were old friends. "Let's go take a little walk." "Yeah. I think I saw a police officer a few meters down the path." He gently touched her shoulder to guide her. She pulled. "Away, don't touch me," she said louder now. The man's eyes darted around. A few tourists passed, none of them paying attention. He smiled again, but this time it didn't reach his eyes. "I'm trying to help you," he said, voice tightening. "We don't want to make a scene." "Do we?" Maddie's breathing grew shallow. Her instincts screamed. She took a step back, but his hand shot out again, this time wrapping around her wrist. Not tight, not yet, but firm enough that she couldn't easily slip away. "Let go," she said, starting to panic. "No need for that tone," he whispered harshly, his face shifting from friendly to something else. "We'll find your parents. Don't worry. Come on." She tried to twist free, but he leaned in close. "If you scream, I'll tell. Everyone, you're my niece. You don't want people to think you're lying, do you? Just be a good girl, and this will be over quick." His other hand moved to the small of her back, not a guiding touch. Something different. Something wrong. Maddie gasped, said stop. She cried loud enough that a few heads turned, but most looked away, probably thinking it was just some fussy child or tired tourist. The man's grip tightened. "Enough," he hissed. "You're coming with me now." And with that, he clamped one hand over her mouth and began dragging her sideways through the crowd. Everything blurred. Maddie kicked at his leg, but he was too strong. The candy offer was gone. The fake warmth gone. Now he was just force pulling her toward this alley that curved behind. The palace square. Her eyes darted frantically. People were nearby, but none looked directly at them. Her scream muffled against his hand. Then between shoulders and heads, she saw him, one of the royal guards still unmoving, but facing their direction. The scarlet uniform, the gleaming boots, the towering bare skin cap. And something else, something sharp beneath the ceremonial stillness. A pair of eyes watching. Maddie's breath caught. She didn't know what to do. Could he even move? Weren't guards. Supposed to stay still no matter what. But she was in his line of sight now. Her legs kicked harder, and just before the man could yank her beyond the last row of tourists, a tear slipped from the corner of her eye. That's when everything changed. Lance Corporal Edward Statham had stood at his post for nearly 2 hours, motionless beneath the weight of tradition, the heat of the sun, and the unspoken burden of generations. His posture was perfect, rifle angled at his side, shoulders. Squared beneath scarlet wool, bare skin cap shadowing his eyes. To the tourists, he was part of the scenery, to his superiors, just another standard bearer of ceremonial discipline. But beneath the uniform was a soldier, a father, a man who, despite the silence expected of him, noticed everything. It wasn't the scream that alerted him. There hadn't been one. It wasn't even the crowd. Their movement always ebbed and flowed like tidewater against the palace gates. It was the look, that fleeting flash, of raw, unmistakable terror in a child's eyes, and the tear that followed slow, deliberate, and just wrong. Guards were trained to scan. Without seeming to, Statham's eyes had followed the man and the little girl for 2 full minutes before that tear fell. The uneven grip, the way her body resisted, even as he smiled, the tension in her shoulders. And now, this. His hand clamped around her mouth as he dragged her sideways through the shifting crowd. Statham didn't hesitate. Protocol dictated he remain in place, but his instincts, they were already louder than any rulebook. A child was in danger, and no ceremonial code on earth was worth ignoring. That his boots broke the silence first. The sharp crack of leather against stone sliced through the murmurs of the crowd like a firecracker. Heads turned, cameras lowered, conversations just stopped. The tourists nearest him jumped back instinctively. Guards didn't move. Everyone knew that. But Edward Statham was moving. He stepped forward with purpose, rifle-gripped boots pounding in precise rhythm as he advanced toward the pair now less than 20 mi away. The man dragging the girl hadn't noticed him yet. Another few seconds and they'd have vanished behind that marble column into the less trafficked corridor that led toward the perimeter fence. Not today. You stop right there. Statham's voice was thunder, commanding, deep, no hint of hesitation. The man jerked around, and for the first time, panic spread across his face. The girl. Maddie kicked his shin hard and wriggled free for half a second before he yanked her back against him. I said, "Drop the child." Now. People were pulling away, creating space instinctively. Phones came up. Tourists scrambled to record what they assumed must be some dramatic ceremonial moment. It wasn't. The man tried to smile again with that same practiced ease. I was just helping. Her. She's lost. Statham didn't wait for lies. He broke into a run. 12 strides closed the distance. The man spun, dragging Maddie in front of him like some kind of human shield. Stay back. She's lost. I swear. The soldier didn't blink in one smooth movement. He dropped his rifle, pivoted on his heel, and slammed his full body weight into the man's chest with military precision. The impact sent both sprawling to the cobblestones. Maddie tumbled safely to the side. In seconds, the man was face down, Statham's. Knee planted between his shoulder blades, one hand wrenching his wrist behind his back, while the other locked around the base of his neck. "Let me go!" the man shouted. "This is assault. I didn't do anything." But the moment his hand had been forced off Maddie's mouth, her voice returned, loud, trembling, but unmistakably real. "He touched me," she cried. "He said he'd buy me sweets, and he put his hand on me. I said no. I told him no. He tried to pull me away." The crowd's mood shifted instantly from confusion to realization, from whispers to disgust. Murmurs rippled. Did she say he touched her? That's not his daughter. Someone called the police. Palace security had already begun moving. 2 officers sprinted from the gate checkpoint, while a third radioed for city police. In the meantime, Lance Corporal Statham held the man pinned with the quiet strength of someone who had done this before, many times under far more dangerous circumstances. "You all right?" he asked over his shoulder, never taking his weight off the man beneath him. Maddie, now crouched on the pavement, nodded shakily. He tried to drag me away. I didn't know what to do. "You did everything right," Statham said firmly. "You said no. That's all anyone ever has to say." Palace security arrived within seconds, securing the man in proper handcuffs, while another officer stepped between Maddie and the scene, shielding her from the growing crowd. "He said he was helping me." She sobbed. "He said he'd take me to the police." "You did the right thing," the officer assured her gently. "And that man is not going anywhere now." The arrested man spat toward the ground, still panting from the tackle. "This is madness. I'm not a criminal." But just then one of the security supervisors approached from the side, his face grim. "We've got a hit on his ID," he said. "Name's Peter. Larrick registered sex offender out on parole, multiple charges from 10 years ago." Even the tourists could hear the words. A wave of revulsions swept the crowd. People stepped back. Parents gripped their children tighter. Lance, Corporal Stathitham, stood slowly reclaiming his rifle from the ground. He said nothing. His expression remained locked in that silent, unreadable focus that only the most seasoned guards can maintain. But his eyes found Maddie again. She looked up at him, not scared anymore, not crying, just wide-eyed and grateful. And for the first time that day, Edward, Statham gave a slight nod. He hadn't just broken protocol, he'd broken it for the right reason. By the time the City of Westminster police arrived, the palace courtyard had transformed from this picturesque tourist hotspot into an active scene of intervention. Barriers had been reinforced by palace security. The crowd had thinned, pushed back by officers keeping a respectful radius. Tourists whispered among themselves, still trying to process what they had just seen. A royal guard breaking, formation tackling a man to the ground, and a little girl sobbing as she clutched her elbow, her voice trembling through the London air. Two plain-clothed detectives moved briskly through the security cordon and knelt beside the detained man. "Name?" one asked. The suspect was silent. "Fine," the officer muttered. "We'll get it off the ID he tried to pass earlier." He glanced at the uniformed officer beside him. "He's definitely the one the guard confirmed. Physical contact." "More than confirmed," the palace officer said grimly. Witnesses heard her say, "He touched her." Tried to lure her off-site. Guard intervened mid-abduction. "Let's get him in the van," the detective said carefully. The man didn't protest this time. As the cuffs were tightened and he was escorted off toward a waiting police vehicle, he turned to glance over his shoulder once, then twice, his face no longer calm or smooth, just pale, cornered. Lance Corporal Statham remained by the inner gate, his face unreadable, blood still rushing through his ears. His forearm throbbed from the struggle, but he barely registered it. He was watching the little girl. She sat on this folding medical stool, now wrapped in a thermal foil blanket provided by one of the medics. A female paramedic knelt in front of her, checking her vitals, brushing the hair gently from her face with gloved fingers. "She okay?" Statham asked quietly. "She's in shock, but nothing is broken. No visible trauma apart from some early bruising along the upper arm," said the medic without looking up. "That'll heal the rest." "Well, that's for her parents and a good counselor to help with." As if summoned by fate, a shout broke through the murmuring crowd. "Maddie." The voice was frantic, a woman's American accent. Seconds later, a man's voice followed, just as panicked Maddie. "Where is she?" The crowd parted. A man and woman pushed their way through, breathless and wild-eyed. The woman, mid-30s, red hair and a frizzy ponytail, stumbled as she reached the police line. "That's her." Maddie's voice cracked. "Let them through," the officer said immediately. Maddie was already off the stool before the paramedic could stop her. "Mommy!" The woman dropped to her knees, arms wide, and Maddie collided into her, sobbing uncontrollably. The man fell beside them, wrapping them both in his arms. "We were looking for you everywhere," he choked. "My God, we thought I got lost," Maddie said through broken breaths. "And then that man, he said he'd help me find you, but he wasn't nice. He was bad. Really bad." The mother didn't respond at first. She just held her daughter tighter, rocking back and forth. "It's okay now," she whispered. "It's okay, he can't hurt you. You're safe." Lance Corporal Stathitham stood at a distance, expression still fixed in disciplined neutrality, but his jaw flexed slightly as he watched the reunion. The father looked up, his gaze locking on Statham. "Was it you?" he asked, rising slowly. "You're the one who—" Statham offered only a small nod. "I intervened." The father crossed to him quickly and extended his hand. "You saved her, sir. I don't even know what to say." Statham hesitated. For a second, Royal Guards didn't usually break formation. Didn't shake hands on duty, didn't get thanked like this, but today was not a usual day. He took the man's hand, firm grip, respectful. She did most of the work, trusted her instincts, knew not to go with a stranger. That's down to how you raised her. She's always been bright. The father said, takes everything in. But my God, if you hadn't seen her. We were just taking a photo, the mother said, wiping her eyes. Just one picture of the march, and then she wasn't there anymore. We thought maybe she'd wandered back to the gate, so we circled around, and it only takes a few seconds, Statham said. His voice wasn't harsh, but it carried weight. Tourist spots like this are prime targets, and predators don't need much time. The father looked down, shame rising in his face. We never thought nobody ever does, Statham said. But from now on, always keep her between you and the crowd, one hand on her. And don't assume your surroundings are safe just because you're near guards or security. We're watching, but there are blind spots. The mother stepped forward, still holding Maddie. Can we thank you properly? We're flying out in 3 days, Boston. If you're ever in the States, I appreciate that, Statham said with a rare softness. But I'll be here at the palace. Same post, same boots, just watching. The mother looked at him a moment longer, then turned back to her daughter. Police were finishing paperwork now, taking statements from witnesses. The offender was already on his way to a station for formal booking, and Maddie, who just an hour ago was watching the parade, probably licking an ice lolly, had become the reason. An entire security response, activated palace officials came to speak with Statham shortly afterward. His shift was formally ended early, and a replacement took over his position. But even as he walked back inside the palace gates, the image of the girl's tear still hung in his mind. One tear, one look, that was all it had taken. And sometimes it was all you needed. It wasn't until the early evening that Lance Corporal Edward Statham finally removed his bearskin hat and sat alone on a wooden bench inside the guard barracks' quiet courtyard. The parade square beyond had returned to normal tourists, laughing camera shutters, clicking the late summer sun, casting long shadows across the stone. But for him, the day wasn't normal. It would never be just another palace shift again. A light knock interrupted the silence. It was Sergeant Wilkes, his direct superior, older, weathered, but with this calm presence that made his words weigh heavier than most. "You all right?" he asked, stepping out into the courtyard. Statham nodded slowly. Physically, yes. Wilkes sat beside him, glancing across the parade square. "I read the full report, saw the witness statements. Palace security is backing you fully. Police, too. You'll likely get accommodation for this." Statham didn't respond right away. "I wasn't thinking about any of that. When I broke formation, I know you weren't," Wilkes replied. "And that's what makes it worth more." Statham ran a hand over his bandaged forearm. "I've done 6 tours overseas, seen more than enough ugliness. But this," he exhaled. "This was a child in the middle of London, 10 FT from the gates of the Crown, and he still tried it. They always do," Wilkes said quietly, "because they think the uniform means statues, not soldiers." Statham looked up. "That's what worries me, the way people stare. At us, phones out, laughing, trying to provoke a reaction. They don't realize we're trained to do more than stand still." "They will now," Wilkes replied. The two men sat in silence for a moment, the sound of distant footsteps echoing off the stone. Then Wilkes added, "The commissioner called earlier confirmed the man's identity. His real name is Gavin Holt, registered sex offender on parole, slipped through a loophole, was flagged in Birmingham last month for loitering near a primary school." Statham's jaw tightened. "And now he's in custody being processed." "As we speak," Wilkes confirmed. "They're pulling CCTV, checking his movements in the capital over the last week." They think Maddie might not have been his first attempt, just the first time he got caught. Statham didn't say anything. He just looked down at the soft scuffs on his black boots, still faintly coated in the dust from where he'd tackled Halt earlier that day. A door creaked open from the corridor behind them. It was a civilian palace. Staffer, one of the guest coordinators. In her hand was a small folded card. "Message for Lance Corporal Statham," she said softly, offering it. He took it, unfolding the paper inside in a child's handwriting, wobbly and pink with too many hearts. Was a drawing of a tall soldier, with a black hat and red coat, holding hands with a small girl. Beneath it were 3 words, misspelled but unmistakable. "You saved me." A smile touched the edge of Statham's lips. He folded the paper carefully and slid it into his jacket pocket. The drawing was simple, but something about those 3 misspelled words hit him harder than any commendation ever could. He traced his finger over the crayon lines, remembering how small her hand had felt when he'd helped her stand up after the tackle, how her whole body had been shaking, but she'd still managed to look him in the eye and say, "Thank you," before the medics wrapped her in that blanket. She asked if she could give it to you in person. The staffer added, "But her parents thought it would be too much for today. They're flying home soon. Said if you're ever in Boston." Statham nodded gently. "I'll keep that in mind." As the staffer left, Wilkes rose to his feet. "You did well today, Edward. Not just as a soldier, as a man." Statham stood to, adjusted his coat. "It's what any man should have done. But not every man would have noticed a single tear in a sea of faces," Wilkes replied. "And that's the difference." Wills paused, then added, "You know I've been doing this for 23 years, seen thousands of tourists come and go. Most days nothing happens. But it's the days like today that remind us why we're really here." Statham nodded. "When I saw her tear, it wasn't just water on her cheek. It was like watching someone's last hope slip away. I couldn't let that happen. The Americans sent word through the embassy." Wilkes continued, "They want to make sure you know how grateful they are." Apparently, Maddie hasn't stopped talking about the soldier who saved her since they got back to their hotel. As the evening shadows lengthened across the palace grounds, Statham stood and straightened his uniform one more time. Tomorrow he'd be back at his post, motionless and vigilant as always. But something had shifted inside him today. Every child's face in the crowd would mean something different now. Every tear would be a potential call for help. And he'd be ready. Because sometimes being a guardian means more than just standing guard. What would you have done if you saw a little girl crying through a crowd? Would you have noticed that silent plea for help? And if someone like Gavin Halt stood just feet away from your child, would you have trusted the Royal Guard to protect them? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If this story moved, you hit that like button. It helps us share these powerful stories with more people. And if you haven't already, subscribe and press the notification bell so you never miss a new video. Share this with someone who needs to understand that Royal Guards aren't just ceremonial. They're trained soldiers ready to act when it matters most. Our previous stories are appearing on screen now. Tap 1 to keep watching, and we'll see you tomorrow at the same time with another powerful Royal Guard story.